it saves the internet from these distributed denial of service attacks where people just attack that server so that it can't serve that data out anymore, because now the data is available anywhere that indexes the Metanet. And, we can flip the table on the whole security model of the internet. And I think we can do that very quickly. I would say, within 5 years, if everything goes well, we're going to start to see thousands of websites transitioning to this new model.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we have Brendan Lee joining us from the Bitcoin Association. Brendan, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, Brittany.
Oh, it's great to have you on the show, Brendan. So I want to start off with something very simple, just like, what is your role within the Bitcoin Association? How does the Bitcoin Association work? And what does it do for those who may not know?
Okay, so my role was created very early on in the association. So before it was moved to Switzerland and turned into a non-profit. So officially the title is Training and Development Manager, but really I would say it's much more in line with what we now call content specialists. So I create content that goes into the courses that are available for people on the Bitcoin SV Academy. And so the courses I've done include the Introduction to Bitcoin Theory, the Introduction to Bitcoin Infrastructure. We're just working on one which is targeted at enterprise users, and which is really not so much of an academic course, but more of a introduction to Bitcoin SV and telling people what we're all about and what's possible. And so actually just been working on that right now, which is pretty fun.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, what you guys are doing for the space is amazing, and I think education is super important. So the fact that you're able to help facilitate that is hugely important, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And what we've really focused on from the beginning is not so much creating something that's, there's a lot of stuff out there that's, you come and get education and really you're just sitting there watching videos. We really wanted to create something that we could turn into a professional certification. And so I want companies in the space who are looking for potential employees to be able to go to somebody or to look at a field of candidates and be able to show that, so these guys have all done these courses. And so we know that by virtue of that fact that straight away that they're going to have a much more useful working understanding of Bitcoin and be able to apply themselves much more quickly into what we're doing. And certainly some of the feedback that we've had from companies in the space is that that's the case. People who've come in, then been asked to go and do the course, immediately are a lot more effective in their roles, because it's really giving them that understanding, not so much of really the specific nitty gritty. There'll be higher level courses that will really go right down into the details. But, the first kind of introduction courses, which is what we've produced until now, is really about teaching people the design intent behind the system. So what are the incentives? How do the incentives create a situation where this network spontaneously forms out of nothing? And how does that network regulate itself, keep itself going, and then scale? And why does proof of work allow that to happen? And so that's, really trying to tease that out of our own understanding. And I think for everyone who works on the academy, even writing these courses is a massive learning curve, because we have to first learn this stuff ourselves.
Right.
Then we have to understand it well enough to be able to explain it to people who want to learn. And that's way more challenging than anyone thinks. I don't want to, people will be amazed how much time and effort goes into producing these courses. There's hundreds of hours.
That was going to be my next question, is just like, what are the biggest challenges you're facing right now? And you just hit it on the head. I'd say that, and I think I think people probably don't understand how much work is being put into that, because there's a lot of businesses out there that want to know more about Bitcoin and bring people on to work and develop these things for their businesses, but they're not sure where to even begin. And then somebody might come in and say, hey, well, I know what I'm doing, but how does any business who doesn't have any knowledge of Bitcoin know whether or not they have that knowledge? So I think what you guys are doing is really key for that development in the space.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's so important as well, because of what's happened with the blockchain industry and crypto. There's a million people out there who will call themselves experts without batting an eyelid, and I think in the majority of cases, these people really don't understand the underlying system very well at all. Maybe they can program a smart contract in Solidity, but that doesn't make you an expert and it doesn't make you a genius. You've got to really understand why the system is the way it is. And certainly, I would say that for anyone who wants to build on Bitcoin and is looking at creating a company or a platform, should do these courses, because it will really help you to understand the way the system sits underneath what you build. And we always hear from Jimmy Wynn that it's about a rock solid foundation. Well, this is really telling you what the structure of that foundation is, and where do you put the plinth that you're going to build your thing on.
Right.
Because certainly I'm aware of companies and companies that you've heard of who have designed things in ways that really don't are not the way they should have been designed.
Okay.
And it's causing them a ton of problems. And it's a real shame, because they're problems that could have easily been avoided if they had done things, and not hugely differently, really kind of like just a few minor changes, and these problems that they're having at the moment would not be there. So I think that just speaks volumes as to how important it is for people to really have that underlying knowledge before they go out gung-ho and just start coding.
Right. So in your opinion, what would you say is like the biggest misunderstanding, misconception about Bitcoin for most people that we should really help to solve, and what you guys are helping to solve right now, aside from like education? What's the biggest misconception that you see?
I would say it is that Bitcoin itself is the core value item in the system. That the Bitcoin tokens themselves carry some kind of value. And while that's true, they do carry a value. They are the currency with which you purchase services on the network. That's how you pay miners. That's how they're the little bits of paper that you tear up to create your tokens. But in reality, I think it's understanding how to create those tokens, and it is those tokens themselves that will be the main value carrying element. And I'm not really talking about NFTs and all of this kind of thing. It's much bigger than that. It's anything that today we use a piece of paper or a card or something to manage will migrate across onto this system. And I think at a certain point, or there'll be a point in time where we realize that the amount of valuable things that are being stored on the Bitcoin ledger is many orders of magnitude greater than the value of the actual Bitcoin itself. So maybe there'll be $50 billion in the actual Bitcoins, but then that $50 billion will be being used to manage, $50 trillion worth of other stuff. And that's kind of what we need to get to. We're nowhere near there yet. And I think that's probably the biggest misconception, is that people are still looking at the Bitcoin tokens themselves as the core usable thing. And while we still need to know how to use them, because we are using them when we are using tokens, we should be starting to think about Satoshis themselves as just almost like a blank piece of paper that we can turn into anything that we need, infinitely recyclable, easy to use, liquid, fast, cheap. all of these things. So
I definitely like that analogy there, and the way that you laid all that information out, because I think you're right, 100%. Most people are just looking at the main coin itself and thinking trying to put a value proposition on it, and being like, oh, this is what it's worth, and not seeing below those layers of what it could be. So it's super exciting to see what we'll be able to be capable of here in the future, right? So
yeah.
I guess touching on that a little bit more, what would be the one piece of advice that you give somebody just starting off in Bitcoin? What would you say to them, or even a company looking to get started into Bitcoin? What would be the advice that you give to either of those?
It would be to don't focus on taking Bitcoin for payments. Like this is I think a big mistake that I see a lot of people making all the time, is that the first thing that they want to do is railroad everyone using their platform into using BSV to make the payments within the system. And I think immediately upon doing that, even say wider, people who force you to use crypto as your payment, already you're limiting yourself to the people who hold and want to use crypto. And so that even then, so you think of all of the people who have crypto, probably 80% of them have no interest in using crypto to do anything with it or buy anything. They've just bought it so that they can flip it in 6 months time,
right,
to buy their Lambo or whatever they want to buy. Yeah. So already you've got that, the crypto people. Then maybe 20% of that is the crypto people who want to use their crypto. And thankfully in BSV, like most people are keen to use BSV because it's so cheap and fast and easy, and it's actually kind of fun. I love doing stuff with Bitcoin, but it's a tiny market. There's hardly, while it's growing all the time, it's still a tiny market. It is a microcosm of the crypto economy, which is a microcosm of the global economy. And so if you want your platform to be successful, I would say the first thing that you should do is forget the idea of using BSV to make and take payments, and look straight away at integrating credit cards and really those legacy payment frameworks, but doing it in such a way that there's a very clear cutoff. When the fiat money comes in, everything that happens after that is tokenized on BSV. And because as soon as you've done that, you're bringing the same liquid, fast, fun usability to that fiat value. And the people who are using your system aren't all of a sudden exposed to some speculative asset. They're not having to go to an exchange and send their money and buy something that they don't understand and hold it in some crazy wallet where it's telling them to write down words and sock them away in a drawer. Like, you can get away from all of that and still give them that really amazing Bitcoin experience. And they won't even know that they're using Bitcoin. All they'll know is that they came to your website, signed in, spent $5 and had a really crazy, awesome time. And that's what I think that we should all be, heading towards, is giving people that crazy, awesome time without the speculation, without even really thinking about Bitcoin or worrying about what's underneath. And it's like, to quote Craig Wright, we really want to be plumbing. No one wants to know when they turn on the faucet, where does the water come from? They just want to know that when they turn on the faucet, cold water comes out and they can wash their hands. And that's really what Bitcoin should be,
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. No, I like that a lot, Brendan. Well, speaking about tokens, as I understand it, you actually have your own project, Elast token.
Correct.
What's Elast token, and what are you trying to achieve with it?
Okay, so Elast is my company, and so we have a token system that we developed based on some intellectual property that I created a couple of years ago, and really it's a method of creating tokens in a way that allows them to retain that flexibility of Bitcoin. And so what we decided from the very beginning is that we wouldn't really lock ourselves into any particular protocol. So we have what we call a method of issuing and using tokens, which allows us to trace them very quickly and easily using just the records on the public ledger. But there's no particular script or functionality that we enforce that needs to be used. So if you need a token that is just like even a form where you put some information in and maybe you can redeem it for something, that's easy to create, and we can do that. And whereas I think a lot of the other token protocols out there, they're designed to create a thing that is a very specific type of token, which is a token that carries a label that represents something that you transfer to somebody else. And realistically, if you look at the use cases for tokens, probably 95 to 99% of them never get transferred to anyone. They either expire or they get redeemed for a good or service. And so to be able to do that, you really need to be able to approach the way that that token is created with a specific view to fulfilling that particular use case.
Okay.
And the problem with a lot of the other token protocols that are out there at the moment is they're already designed for a completely different use case. And if you want to bring them across and kind of shoehorn them into a different use case, you've got to break what they're actually built to do. And so we're really trying to simplify that and make it such that anything that really you can imagine be done with a token that you can give to somebody, that should be able to be done. So that person can put information in that token, they can redeem that token for something else, it can become something different when they do something to it. Whatever you need, we can design all of that to happen within the framework that we've developed. So that's really what we say that Elast does more than that is allows companies to create a private permissioned ledger that sits within the Bitcoin public ledger, and from within which those tokens and that use case can be delivered to people. And so anyone who's coming to your website, service, whatever it is, and using those tokens has a really quick and easy way of validating that those tokens are genuine without you needing to be involved. So they can check all of that based on the token and the public ledger. They can query some other service or node or whatever and do all of those checks manually by themselves. The issuer doesn't need to really take a part in that. But at the same time, in most cases, the issuer is going to want to be providing that service to their customers anyway, because it makes it more slick and faster and all of those things. So it's really about, just trying to bring all of that amazing functionality that we have access to and make it easy to use and to build into platforms is what Elast is about.
That's really cool. And it really ties into like what you guys are trying to teach and everything that we were talking about prior to this. So it all kind of plays into each other one after the other. So
it's funny that you would say that, because really one of the reasons that I've stayed on at the Academy, and it's quite hard to sort of divide my attention between the two roles, and it's something that I've struggled with, but I've maintained it because the only reason I was able to actually realize this and develop the system to where it has been is because the Academy was asking me to deliver this very detailed, low-level understanding of Bitcoin. And because I kind of did that and I had all of that very fresh in my head, that kind of gave me the sort of the launch pad I needed to really be able to develop that and come up with those ideas. And so it really is, while it's two different jobs, they kind of, they're very close to each other, I think.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool, Brendan. So it sounds like you guys have already built everything out with Elast. So is ready to go. Is there any companies right now that's interacting with it, or?
Yes. So we developed the initial proof of concept for AMLA Gold, who were creating or are creating a token that, or a token system, I guess, for issuing certificates that represent gold bullion. And then on top of that, issuing a cash-based gold-backed currency against those certificates. And they're still looking for a customer for their system, but the whole prototype and it's completely working, and everything is really smooth, and that's all built on that framework. What we built for them, we then turned into our own sort of development framework, which we call Elast Plus, and that's simply a set of libraries and APIs that we use to develop the applications that we're asked to build by our customers. So we're working with one of the teams who've just gone through the Block Dojo in the UK called BuzzMint, and they have. So we've built a working prototype for them, which is it's kind of it's a little bit NFT type platform. So it's all about creating brands and having those brands being able to issue digital properties and transfer those digital properties to their customers. But the goal is not just to be selling, pictures of this or whatever. It's to embed real value items within those tokens and be able to sell those to consumers. And so we're talking things like magazines, warranties for luxury goods, certifications, all of this kind of thing. And I think our system really lends itself well to that situation where you're trying to do a bunch of quite diverse things within a particular framework, because we're not restricted in how we create the tokens. We can issue right next to a token that is a kind of like a magazine that opens up and displays a bunch of content. Another token that is a piece of music, or another token that's links back to a gallery and gives you open access to that for a particular amount of time, or access to a live venue. All of these different things can be done. And you just need to consider what information needs to be in that token such that when it is redeemed, that they can check that it's genuine and that this is the person who is meant to be redeeming it. And that's really all you need. There's a lot of other stuff happening out there that I think goes a bit over the top and really overcomplicates things for everyone.
Well, it sounds like Elast would be perfect for helping push the Metanet, so to speak.
Absolutely. So our whole private ledger and the permissions that we assert upon those private ledgers is created using Metanet protocol. Now we've had to extend that protocol because in its current, the way it's been released, it really doesn't have the functionality that we needed. So we took it upon ourselves to essentially make some custom extensions to that protocol so that we could have spendable Metanet nodes. So essentially what that means is we can create a location within a private ledger, and then when we need to, we can actually update the data that's in that location. And we do that by taking the coin that node sits within and spending it. And so what happens is anybody who's looking at a transaction that points back to a previous version of that page just has to ask, is this the latest version? And if it's not, they'll just be pointed forward in time until they hit the latest version of that node. And that really is, I think, what the ultimate version of the Metanet was meant to be. But at the time that it was released, which was in 2019, we hadn't gone through the Genesis upgrade yet. And so there wasn't actually a way for people to embed data like that directly into spendable coins, or to create those kinds of quite, longish and complicated scripts that assert those permissions. But as soon as the Genesis upgrade happened, which was, sort of right when I started developing Elast, all of that became possible. And so that was one of the very first things that we focused on, was how can we create a Metanet kind of graph, but do it in such a way that we have multiple people able to assert permissions within. And, that was the whole idea behind the Tuvalu National Digital Ledger, which was one of the earliest things that we worked on. That's how BuzzMint works. So the brands have brand managers, and within those brand managers, you can actually have a team, and that whole team can sign off on different things as needed. So yeah, the Metanet, I think, is going to really revolutionize how internet services are delivered, because, if you look at the current model of today, all of the information is held on a server, and anyone who wants to access that information has to go all the way through the internet until they get to that server, request what they want, the server has to package it up, and it's got to get all the way back across the internet to you. Now what happens is, when I want to create a website, I just update the public ledger, and then anybody who wants to see that information goes to an endpoint that will serve them public ledger data over the Metanet and say, hey, I want this. and it will just peel it off the public ledger and serve it straight to their device. So even if I'm in, Canada and I'm updating something, someone in Australia will talk to a Metanet endpoint in Australia and say, oh, please give me this updated information from Canada. And there'll be a copy of that sitting in Australia. I'll just get that straight off there. And really, it saves the internet from these distributed denial of service attacks where people just attack that server so that it can't serve that data out anymore, because now the data is available anywhere that indexes the Metanet. And, we can flip the table on the whole security model of the internet. And I think we can do that very quickly. I would say, within 5 years, if everything goes well, we're going to start to see thousands of websites transitioning to this new model.
That's really exciting. I think that's the way of the future, just making things more efficient. And that's really what it's really way more efficient. But
it's not just more efficient. It's far more secure. It's far more private, because now if I'm accessing that information, I'm not even logging into your server. I'm just getting it off here. And as long as I've got an account and you've given me keys that I need to decode that information, like, I don't need to contact you every time I want to update something. I just pull it off the ledger. And so it's way more private, it's way more efficient, it's way more secure. And I think ultimately, even though we're talking about moving to pay-per-use models,
right,
I think it will be a lot cheaper. We'll see,
I love hearing your passion about it. It's so exciting. It makes me excited about the future, just waiting to see what we can accomplish here over the next few years. But you mentioned Tuvalu. Tuvalu. What's sorry.
Hello.
If it's not the kids, it's the dog,
That's all right.
Excuse me. But you mentioned Tuvalu. And I believe that I've heard you speak a little bit about that previously, sometime last year. What's going on with Tuvalu? And
So Tuvalu, what we proposed there was quite novel and essentially a reimagination of government services and how they can function, and a migration away from what they have at the moment, which is a lot of quite manual, paper-based services, to a delivery framework that's built on this kind of Metanet type system. And one of the things for Tuvalu is that I would say an existentially challenged nation. There's no part of the whole country that's, I think, more than 11 feet above sea level. They are worried about the future. And so I think what this can deliver for them is a form of government that can be transported to wherever the nation of Tuvalu moves in that kind of worst case scenario. And unfortunately, the project is taking a lot longer to get started than we originally hoped. And, there's been a change of government, and with every change of government, obviously comes new requirements and new hoops to jump through. And so we're still in that kind of hoop jumping phase, but hoping that within the next 12 to 24 months, we'll actually start to see material progress and be able to deliver some elements of the project. And, it's quite a wide-ranging project. So there were, we were looking at doing fishing licenses, land registry, citizenship data and application process, as well as transitioning their money system across to tokens on Bitcoin. And so, it's a huge ask for them to trust us to transition them to that new model, and do it safely and in a way that is as minimally disruptive as possible.
Right.
And I think that because of that, there's always, a degree of hesitancy when you're proposing something that's as grand and as bold as that. We're asking them to be first. They're one of the smallest countries in the world, and to sort of put themselves out in front of everyone like that, I think is
Intimidating.
certainly intimidating and difficult. So look, we're ready to work with them, and whenever they're ready to go. But at the moment, it's kind of like very much, for want of a better terminology, like it's a hand-holding process, really helping them understand what we're trying to deliver, and make sure that they can understand that it's not scary. It's really just taking all of the things that they print on paper and printing them on Satoshis instead. And, that's kind of at the, and right down to the dollar bill that they hand around at the shops. We're just printing, instead of printing that on a piece of paper, we're printing that on a Satoshi and then allowing that Satoshi to be transferred around to whoever's holding that piece of money at any given moment. So, I still think the project will go ahead, but it may be, another year or two before we get really into the nuts and bolts of it.
Where do you see if Tuvalu, when Tuvalu, I'm going to be optimistic and say when Tuvalu goes through with this, because I believe that they will. I mean, it's a good system, but like you said, that you just have to educate and handhold and get them through the process. Let's say we get them through the process. Where do you see Bitcoin scaling in terms of government reach in the future moving forward? If Tuvalu adopts this, wouldn't you say that other countries would all of a sudden be like, okay, well, I see their economic business model or whatever you might want to call it, and they seem to be doing good?
So, I mean, when it comes down to it, the Metanet is a system that upon which you can literally build the constitution and fabric of government.
Right.
And by that I mean that collaboratively a nation state can work together to agree upon a set of terms under which they want to live within their society, and they can sign that document into existence, not on a piece of parchment that you're going to put in the Smithsonian for 500 years,
right,
but as a living document that exists on the public ledger, that anyone, and the really interesting thing about this is that then anybody who wants to go and look at the Constitution doesn't need to go to the library and get a book that's got a picture of it. They can go straight to the public ledger and they can look at the exact document that everyone agreed to. And under that, you can build the entire framework of a government, and you can use it to run your elections. You can use it to capture and pass legislation. You can use it to amend legislation. You can capture court proceedings and judgments and rulings. And so imagine that instead of case law being held in these exclusive libraries that only lawyers have access to, that every single case that ever took place in the United States was there in public, and anybody could go and research and do the work and, come up with arguments that really, prove or disprove a certain thing within a court of law. There's so many advantages to taking those things that should be public and actually making them public and available through this technology. And we really can, I don't think it's about reimagining what a country is, because a country really is just a group of people trying to live together and in the pursuit of happiness. And that's really, when you look at the founding documents of the United States, that's exactly what it says, in the pursuit of happiness. And so really what the Constitution is trying to capture is, how do we ensure that everyone can maximize that opportunity and that people aren't going to tread on each other and take advantage and all of these kinds of things. And, there's not so much that we need to tweak about, the current structure that we have to bring it forward into this kind of, I think, really 21st, 22nd century nation state that we can build. But again, it's a bold vision, and it's something that is going to be, I think, incredibly hard to sell to a lot of people. So, but, that's where I think we can go.
I think you're right, though, that it's especially hard to sell to a lot of people, especially given all the narratives that are in the, crypto space right now, in terms of decentralization and cypherpunks narratives and talking about, well, we need to, well, I'm sure you've heard all of the narratives as a whole, so I don't need to go into it very much, but it's going to be a hard sell to them. But I strongly and firmly believe that Bitcoin is designed to work in unison with government and what's already existing there, and not something that's meant to overtake or overcome government. I don't believe that was what Bitcoin was created to do. So
no. It's a tool for accountability, and really what you have to have is a government or a group of people who want to form government around that idea that they will be accountable. And at the moment, I think what you have in a lot of governments, and I'm not going to point fingers at anyone, but is a lot of people who don't want to be accountable for their actions, and they want the power, but they don't want the responsibility. And I think we need a little bit of Spider-Man in here. With great power comes great responsibility. You can't just have the power and then go off and do whatever you want and be reckless and cost other people everything they have. We're seeing the results of that now, and I think everyone, or certainly most people, will agree that what we want is a system where everyone has the same opportunity, and that doesn't mean that everyone is equal. Like, I don't subscribe to that at all. What I think it means is that from the perspective of the law, everyone is treated equally, and that doesn't mean you begin equally in life. It doesn't mean that you end equally in life, but it means that if you attempt the same things with the same resources and by doing the same methods, you should get the same outcome as somebody else. But that's life is always uncertain. There's a lot of probability in everything that you do, and it's impossible to guess where you're going to end up when you start down a particular journey. Like when I started Elast, I had no idea where we would get to, and still really that future is very hard to divine sometimes, but it's been an amazing journey so far.
Well, let's talk about that journey for a second. So how did you come into the space? How did you find Bitcoin, and what was the journey into Bitcoin? What's the background here?
So prior to this, I was an automation and control systems engineer. So I worked on like industrial control systems for various different things. I had a couple of years working in battery energy technology, designing battery packs for electric vehicles and things. And the company that I was doing that with kind of imploded, and my whole team sort of got fired, but not me, which was a little bit interesting and weird. But I ended up working in a giant office for 20 people by myself for 3 months and with nothing to do, but fully paid. And I just started reading Reddit and kind of getting caught up on the whole story. And I bought some Bitcoin. The first time I bought Bitcoin was 3 days after the Bitcoin Cash hard fork, or 4 days, or whatever it was. And really then tried to use BTC to buy something, and I had to pay $6 in fees. And I was like, wow, this is not right. This is not how I understand this is meant to work.
Right.
And so I really started to go right down into the nitty gritty, and I found that there was this whole civil war happening, and that the industry was tearing itself apart. And I looked at the arguments on each side, and you had one lot saying, no, it's meant to be this thing where you run it on a toy computer at your house, and everyone's toy computers kind of keep these big data center computers in check. And I was like, well, that's the most ridiculous bullshit I've ever heard. These guys who want to go, no, it's you go big and you scale it so that everyone in the world can use it all at once. And then everyone, that's where the security of the network comes from, is by generating this massive amount of traffic, and by still making it extremely cheap and fast to use, it still becomes this revenue juggernaut for the people who are building and maintaining the network. And so immediately from that point on, I was all in on big blocks. And kind of it just went from there. I met James Belding from Tokenized about 6 months after that. I launched my own company selling little backup kits for mnemonic seeds, which I've actually sold just recently. It's just been a bit of a roller coaster ever since then.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I want to touch on that for a quick second, because I think a lot of us that get into the Bitcoin space realize that same progression of information there. Anybody that starts looking at big blocks and everything, they're like, oh, well, this is the thing that should make sense. But as we were speaking about before, the narrative about quote unquote decentralization and needing to run your own Raspberry Pi to help secure there's a huge common misconception there. And so, I guess for people who may be less technical, Could you perhaps elaborate on how Bitcoin is decentralized, but not because everybody needs to run a node?
Well, I would say that it is the removal of a central controlling party at the top of the network. And so really what you have instead of that is a distributed set of enterprise players who each validates all of the activity happening on the network sort of in real time as it happens, but who compete with each other to create the official ordering of those transactions. And so while each competitor will see what's happening on the network in a slightly different order to everyone else, simply by virtue of where they're located in the world, they all agree when somebody finds a valid block that that valid block is an accurate representation of the events that took place. And while they may have some slight disagreement about what the order is, they essentially say that nothing that's been recorded in that block is wrong. And so that decision-making process is done in a distributed manner. There's no single party who gets to say yes or no to anybody who submits a valid block. The only thing that can happen is that collectively the network can reject that block and say, oh, you've recorded a transaction that was previously done, or one of the transactions that you've recorded double spends another transaction that we all saw first, so your block is invalid. But that's something they do as a group. There's no one person who comes in and says, oh, no, this can't happen. And, there's a lot made about how the association came out and advised miners to invalidate a particular block during a 51% attack that took place last year. But I think people misunderstand what was really happening there. By the time the association made that announcement, the miners had already collectively agreed that that was invalid and had put that setting into their nodes and were collectively working on a separate chain that did not include that 51% string of blocks.
Right.
And the Bitcoin Association announcement of that was really to tell everyone else who's out there, because there are still a lot of companies who use, for want of a better word, a full node as kind of their database that they build upon, and those databases would still be following the longer chain. And so by making that announcement, they can effectively tell everyone who's not building on the network that, hey, that chain of blocks that you're probably looking at is not valid. You need to follow this chain instead, because this is where all of the honest miners who we know about and communicate with regularly have decided to go, because these guys are trying to steal money.
Right. Well, I've got a couple of last questions here before we start wrapping things up, Brendan, because this has been a pleasure so far. I'm really enjoying myself. But I suppose, what's something that you believe everybody in Bitcoin should start or stop doing right now to help the community, to help the ecosystem? What is it that we could do as somebody that's not a builder, I suppose?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I want to tell people to do and not do the things that I do and don't do, but then I'm not everyone else. So it's kind of, I think, certainly stop trying to pump the price of BSV or tell people that they need to buy BSV. I don't tell anyone to buy anything. I don't give any kind of financial advice. And we always inform our customers up front that, we're not here to sell you a token. And if you need Bitcoin within your project because we need to tokenize it, we will provide that for you. And you won't have to buy it. It'll just be part of the service fees that we charge to you.
Right.
I think I don't want to say that BSV is never going to go up in value. I can't predict the future, but at the same time, I definitely don't think you should bet the farm on it.
Right.
Like it's
right.
Like, I personally, I really don't hold very much BSV at all. Just my salary at the Bitcoin Association is paid in BSV. I used to be able to use that very easily to pay bills and things like that, but because of all the delistings, that's no longer possible. So now it just kind of sits there and accumulates. But I'm not holding that because I expect it to buy me a Lambo one day. I'm just holding it because it's not convenient for me to do anything except hold it. And so, yeah, I would just say, look, move the discussion away from the price. And people largely do that. Like, the one thing I do like about BSV is we're much more concerned about the possibilities and about the future than we are about the price and the squiggly charts and all of this kind of thing. And, you know, so I think I would just say, try to think about the best future that you can imagine, and then understand how you can get there using the tools that Bitcoin gives us. And that's probably what I would say.
That's perfect. Yeah, I think that sums it up really, really great there, Brendan. Well, is there anything that I should have asked you that you think I should have asked, but I didn't? And how might have you answered that question?
Oh, okay. That's a curly one. Is there anything that you should have asked? No, I don't think so. That this is your interview. But look, I think, you know, it's what could we have covered? Really, the one thing I'm glad is we didn't talk about Craig, because that always usually comes up. You know, I wouldn't say change anything about the interview, actually, Brittany. I think it's been great.
Well, I appreciate you so very much, Brendan, for coming on and talking and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. But
the pleasure was all mine.
Oh, fantastic. But, you know, with that being said, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap things up. So everybody make sure to hit the like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Share this video with a friend, and also follow us on Twitter at BrittanyBits.